The dawn of August 5, 1943, was unusually crisp over southern Italy. In the shadow of the Apennine mountains, the massive silhouette of a B-24 Liberator rested on the tarmac of Cerignola Airfield. Its slab-sided fuselage gleamed faintly under the rising sun, engines cold and silent, yet brimming with lethal potential. Pilots and crew scuttled around it like ants, checking instruments, counting ammunition, and murmuring prayers to a god who seemed to have long since ceased to answer. Captain James Jim Fletcher, 41, walked along the wing, eyes scanning the gleaming machine. He was a veteran of the skies, having flown nearly every bomber the U.S. Army Air Forces fielded. Yet this B-24, the flying Boxcar, was unlike anything he had ever known. She could carry 16 50-caliber Browning machine guns, a payload greater than any bomber the Luftwaffe had ever feared. To the Germans, a single bomber was a small nuisance. But Jim knew this plane could become an entire squadron by herself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. His crew approached with quiet precision. Navigator Lieutenant Harold Hal Green, Bombardier Ensign Thomas Whitaker, Flight Engineer Sergeant Frank Russo, and Tail Gunner Corporal Louis Delgado. Each man understood the stakes. Over the Adriatic, Axis shipping had begun moving reinforcements towards Sicily, and intelligence suggested that a Luftwaffe fighter squadron was patrolling the corridor ahead. Jim's mission was simple on paper: fly, survive, and disrupt. On paper, in reality, it would be chaos. "Load the guns," Jim barked, his voice cutting across the tarmac. "Every turret, every port. We're not just delivering bombs, we're delivering fire." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, gunners climbing into turrets and checking the turrets, Browning machine guns, tracing barrels, and adjusting sights. The Liberator seemed to tremble under their hands, as if acknowledging the violence it would unleash. Its Davis wings, designed for range and efficiency, caught the morning light, hinting at the power stored beneath them. She was built for endurance, yet the Germans would soon learn she could endure far more than bullets alone. Every hatch, every panel, every rivet seemed to hum with anticipation, as though the aircraft itself were alive and aware of the coming battle. Jim climbed into the cockpit, the leather of his flight jacket creaking as he settled into the seat. Hal slid beside him, maps and charts spread out on a foldable navigation table. Whitaker checked his bomb sight, running through a checklist he had committed to memory hundreds of times, yet never had it felt so heavy with consequence. The engines roared to life under Frank's guidance, each radial piston engine thundering like a living beast awakening from slumber. Exhaust smoke curled into the early sky, carrying with it the scent of oil, fuel, and impending war. The ground crew signaled thumbs up, and the Liberator began her lumbering taxi down the runway. The massive aircraft seemed almost reluctant to move, as if it knew the destruction it carried would mark the Adriatic forever. Jim felt the controls respond under his hands, precise despite the plane's enormous weight. At 20,000 feet, the horizon stretched endlessly, the glint of the sun on the waves masking a dangerous corridor patrolled by German fighters. The Luftwaffe, confident in their superior numbers and agility, had no reason to expect the fury they were about to face. As the Liberator climbed, Jim glanced at his crew. Hal's face was taut with concentration, eyes scanning the charts, anticipating enemy positions. Whitaker adjusted the bomb sight, hands steady despite the tension in the cockpit. Frank monitored engine temperatures, oil pressure, and fuel flow, ensuring every system remained within operational limits. Delgado, seated in the tail, peered through the gun sight, eyes narrowing as the first dark specks appeared on the horizon. They were Messerschmitt Bf-109 seconds, sleek and deadly, and trailing them, dive-bombing Stukas that cut through the morning air with their notorious sirens wailing. The first wave of German aircraft descended with terrifying precision. Jim gripped the yoke tightly, his knuckles whitening. "Steady," he muttered to himself. "Count what you can hit, not what you can't." The nose turret opened fire first, sending tracer rounds ripping across the sky. One Bf-109 wrenched violently, smoke trailing from its engine, and spiraled toward the waves below. The Liberator's tail guns cut another Stuka in half, debris scattering like leaves in a storm. Delgado's voice came over the intercom, calm yet deadly. "Two down on the starboard flank. They're not coming back." The Luftwaffe pilots faltered, unable to comprehend the intensity of fire coming from a single bomber. 16. 50-caliber machine guns roared in unison, each turret covering a sector, creating overlapping zones of lethal lead. The Liberator weaved, rolled, and dipped with surprising agility for a plane of her size. Jim maneuvered her with the precision of a surgeon, positioning each gunner for maximum effect. Smoke and tracer fire painted the sky red and orange, the sun glinting off metal and propellers. Minutes felt like hours as the battle raged. One of the Stukas released its payload, bombs plunging toward the convoy below. Whitaker calculated the drop, releasing counter-bombs with meticulous timing. Explosions erupted across the water, sinking 2 supply vessels and crippling a third. Below, sailors scrambled, screaming and ducking, caught between the relentless attack from above and the devastation unfolding in the sea. The Liberator's guns continued to pour fire into the sky, forcing the remaining German aircraft into erratic maneuvers, their formations unraveling under the weight of precision fire. Jim's mind remained focused on one thing: survival and mission success. "Keep firing!" he shouted. "Do not let them regroup." Each burst of gunfire sent enemy pilots into retreat or destruction. The tail turret obliterated another fighter attempting a rear approach, while the waist gunners cut down 2 more Stukas diving toward the convoy. Hal adjusted the flight path constantly, calculating evasive moves to maximize both protection and firepower. Frank's voice crackled over the intercom. "Engines, holding steady. No signs of critical damage yet." As the minutes passed, it became clear that the Liberator was rewriting the rules of aerial combat. One aircraft had outgunned an entire Luftwaffe squadron, sending pilots into disbelief. Reports later described the German pilots' confusion, unable to comprehend how a single plane could carry so much firepower, respond with such coordination, and withstand multiple attacks without faltering. The combination of Davis wings, powerful engines, and disciplined gunners made the B-24 an unstoppable force. Below, the Adriatic waters churned with wreckage, oil slicks glinting like black glass under the sun. Smoke from the burning supply ships rose in tall columns, mingling with the mist from gunfire and tracer rounds. Jim's focus never wavered, his hands steady on the controls as he guided the massive aircraft with a pilot's instinct sharpened by years of experience. Every maneuver was calculated, every adjustment precise, as if the plane itself responded to the collective will of its crew. By the 20th minute of combat, several German fighters had been destroyed, others limped back toward Italian airfields, and the convoy had been severely damaged. The Liberator, despite taking minor flak hits and scratches along her fuselage, remained in pristine operational condition, testament to the robust engineering that had gone into her design. Jim exhaled slowly, glancing at Delgado, who gave a subtle nod of acknowledgement. The tail gunner's eyes reflected the satisfaction of a mission executed flawlessly against overwhelming odds. As the last enemy aircraft withdrew, the Liberator turned westward toward Cerignola. Exhaust smoke spiraled behind her, the sun now high in the sky, reflecting off her polished fuselage. The crew allowed themselves a brief respite, hands loosening on controls and triggers. Below, the Mediterranean shimmered deceptively calm, hiding the devastation they had wrought. Each man understood the significance of the mission. A single, heavy bomber, outfitted with 16 guns, had outgunned a Luftwaffe squadron and altered the course of supply lines in the theatre. Touching down at Cerignola Airfield, the massive plane lumbered along the runway, engines roaring in protest, before finally coming to a stop. Ground crews rushed forward, astonished at the reports coming from the sky. 14 enemy aircraft destroyed, 2 more crippled, and several supply vessels sunk or damaged. Jim climbed out of the cockpit, the weight of fatigue heavy on his shoulders, but tempered by pride. Each crew member emerged, dirty, scorched, and exhausted, yet alive, having defied both the odds and the expectations of their enemy. Later, as the crew debriefed, military intelligence officers gathered maps and reports, astonished at the data. One plane, carrying 16 50-caliber machine guns, had engaged a Luftwaffe squadron and emerged victorious, disrupting Axis reinforcements and proving the destructive power of the B-24 Liberator. Jim walked along the tarmac one last time, fingers brushing along the cool metal of the fuselage. She had been more than a machine today. She had been a force of nature, a guardian in the sky, a flying fortress capable of unmatched devastation. That evening, as the sun set over the Apennines, casting long shadows across the airfield, Jim and his crew gathered for a brief moment of silence. They had survived the impossible, and their plane had earned a legendary status in the annals of aerial combat. The B-24 Liberator, nicknamed the Flying Boxcar, had proven that one aircraft, in the right hands and with the right guns, could outmatch an entire squadron, turning fear into awe and disbelief into legend. The story of that day would be told for decades, a testament to courage, engineering, and the relentless will of men and machine united against overwhelming odds. By 1100 hours, the Liberator had lifted from Cerignola, climbing steadily to 20,000 feet above the sparkling Adriatic Sea. The sun glinted off her Davis wings, long and sturdy, casting a silver sheen over the slab-sided fuselage. The massive engines hummed in synchronized rhythm, a mechanical heartbeat that seemed to resonate through the entire aircraft. Below, the water stretched endlessly, a deceptive calm that belied the danger, looming above. Captain James, Jim Fletcher, 41, gripped the yoke with hands that were steady despite the tension threading through his body. This was no ordinary sortie. Intelligence reports had confirmed a German fighter squadron patrolling near the Italian coast, accompanied by dive-bombing Stukas, their sirens already audible in the minds of men who had faced them before. To most Allied crews, a formation like this would have spelled certain death. Jim's crew moved with silent efficiency. Lieutenant Harold Hal Green, the navigator, scanned charts with eyes sharp and calculating, tracking the convoy below and plotting evasive patterns. Ensign Thomas Whitaker, the bombardier, adjusted his bomb sight, feeling the weight of responsibility in every careful adjustment. Sergeant Frank Russo, the flight engineer, monitored engines, fuel, and hydraulics, ensuring each radial piston engine remained within operational limits. In the tail, Corporal Louis Delgado tightened, his grip on the triggers, fingers already calloused from countless hours of target practice, his eyes narrowing at every approaching shadow. Each man understood the stakes. The Adriatic corridor was vital for Axis reinforcements moving towards Sicily, and failure was measured not just in loss of aircraft, but in hundreds of lives. From above, the first signs of enemy presence appeared as dark silhouettes against the rising sun. The Messerschmitt Beef 109 seconds approached with lethal grace, wings slicing the air like blades, while Stuka dive bombers lurked above, sirens ready to shred nerves and metal alike. To the German pilots, the lumbering B-24 looked like easy prey, an overgrown duck among sharp predators. They laughed over the radio, confident in their speed and numbers, imagining the screams of an Allied crew caught unawares. They had no idea what awaited them. "Keep formation tight," Jim called over the intercom, voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "Let them think they're hunting. We'll show them who hunts today." The B-24 shivered under the command, as if acknowledging the gravity of her role. 16 50-caliber Browning machine guns, manned by 4 focused gunners, and the automated positions overseen by the pilot and bombardier, roared to life. Tracer rounds stitched the sky, leaving fiery lines that cut across the Luftwaffe's wings. The first Bf-109, underestimating the bomber's agility and firepower, surged forward, only to be met with a withering hail of lead from the nose turret. Smoke trailed from its engine almost immediately, the pilot's panicked maneuvers sending it spiraling down into the Adriatic below, disappearing beneath a cresting wave. "Tail gunner, port side," Jim barked, voice crisp with authority. Delgado's hands flew over the triggers, unleashing synchronized bursts that tore through the air. The B-24 trembled under the recoil, the massive frame absorbing the punishment of its own guns as if strengthened by it. Each round ripped through enemy aircraft, fuselages shuddering, wings shearing, and pilots finding their fate sealed before they could even react. Within minutes, 2 Stukas had faltered and spiraled uncontrollably, their sirens silenced, and the German squadron's confidence began to crack. For Fletcher, the sky had transformed into a chessboard, each movement anticipated and countered. He watched enemy formations with a meticulous eye, reading their intentions in the subtle shifts of wings, in the arcs of dive bombers, in the fleeting glint of sun off their fuselage. Each maneuver was met with precise bursts from his gun crews. The Liberator was more than a plane. She was a fortress on wings, a single airborne engine of vengeance, capable of outgunning an entire Luftwaffe squadron with the coordination of its men and the engineering genius of its design. The air seemed to vibrate with kinetic tension. The horizon blurred with motion, tracer rounds weaving a lattice of fiery orange, and smoke trailing behind crippled fighters like black ribbons. Below, the convoy stirred in chaos, sailors ducking beneath the looming shadows of bombs and machine gun fire. Fletcher adjusted the controls, banking the Liberator with a careful twist of the yoke, presenting the next sector of guns to the advancing fighters. Whitaker's bomb sight tracked a small supply vessel below, his hands steady as he released payloads that tore through steel decks and exploded with deadly precision. The water erupted, fire and debris mingling in a spray of destruction, and the surviving German pilots hesitated, their discipline faltering under the onslaught. Hours could have passed in the span of a few minutes. The Liberator climbed and dipped, rolled and twisted, a monstrous dance of metal, fire, and coordinated human effort. Hal guided them like a master strategist, calculating wind speeds, angles, and evasive maneuvers with meticulous care. Frank's voice was steady, over the intercom, reporting engine performance, temperature readings, and warning of minor damage that could be patched in flight. Delgado's hands rarely left the triggers, eyes darting from one enemy to the next, bullets tearing through fuselage and fabric with mechanical precision. The Luftwaffe pilots, once confident, now faced the impossible. A single bomber outmaneuvering and outgunning them with the deadly efficiency of a squadron in itself. One B-109 attempted a head-on pass, a suicide run to catch the lumbering Liberator unaware. Jim anticipated the movement, rolling the massive aircraft to present her broadside. Nose and top turrets unleashed simultaneous fire, tracer rounds converging on the attacking fighter. Smoke curled from its engine, flames licking the wings, and the aircraft plummeted in a spiral, a dark shape disappearing into the blue below. "Good hit," Whitaker said softly, barely audible over the roar of engines and guns. Delgado muttered under his breath, a smile hidden by the wind. "One less to bother us." The remaining Stukas dived, sirens wailing in a futile attempt to intimidate. Fletcher's Liberator climbed just enough to force them into awkward angles, her Davis wings providing lift and stability unmatched in the theatre. Every turret contributed, overlapping fields of fire creating zones where no enemy could safely enter. Bullets tore through wings and fuselage, engines erupted into smoke, and pilots screamed into open microphones, their arrogance evaporating into terror. Jim's focus never wavered. He maneuvered with patience and precision, turning the B-24's size from liability into weapon, presenting gun ports where they were needed, shielding vulnerable points, and unleashing devastation with surgical accuracy. Half an hour into combat, the German formation was fragmented. Confidence had turned to fear, orders into chaos, and the air was thick with smoke, fire, and the metallic tang of spent ammunition. The convoy below had suffered severe losses. 2 supply ships were sunk, a third crippled, and smaller vessels caught in the crossfire. Allied intelligence would later calculate that hundreds of tons of Axis materiel had been destroyed or delayed by the action of a single bomber, flown by a crew whose courage matched the firepower at their disposal. Fletcher's eyes swept across the horizon as the last enemy fighters retreated. The Liberator, though bearing minor damage to a wing and a few punctures across her fuselage, remained airworthy, each system still functional under the stress of combat. Delgado reloaded turrets, fingers moving with practiced speed, while Whitaker checked the bomb site for any remaining ordnance that could be deployed in case of further engagement. Hal adjusted the flight path, bringing them closer to Cerignola, yet maintaining a cautious watch for any last-ditch attacks. Frank's monitors confirmed engine integrity, reporting minor fluctuations but no critical failures. The B-24 had transformed from a lumbering heavy bomber into a symbol of American ingenuity and firepower. 16 guns, combined with disciplined gunners, a skilled pilot, and strategic maneuvering, had turned the tide of the engagement. One aircraft had faced a Luftwaffe squadron and prevailed, rewriting the expectations of aerial warfare in that theatre. Reports later described the German pilot's disbelief. No single bomber had ever demonstrated such coordinated firepower, resilience, and tactical awareness. The Liberator was a revelation, proving that engineering, when combined with human determination, could defy overwhelming odds. As the Liberator descended toward Cerignola, the sea stretching beneath her glimmered with the remnants of destruction. Smoke columns from sinking ships rose into the sky, mingling with vapor trails and the remnants of tracer fire. Jim allowed himself a rare moment to exhale, fingers loosening on the controls. The crew exchanged brief glances, exhaustion etched into their faces, but pride shining in their eyes. They had flown into the maw of enemy fire and emerged victorious, their aircraft a testament to engineering and human courage alike. Touching down on the tarmac, the massive Liberator lumbered across the runway, engines roaring as if celebrating her own survival. Ground crews rushed forward, astonished at the reports filtering down from the sky. 14 enemy aircraft destroyed, 2 crippled, and multiple supply vessels sunk or damaged. The Liberator, nicknamed the Flying Boxcar, had achieved what few thought possible. She had outgunned an entire Luftwaffe squadron and disrupted Axis logistics in the Adriatic. Jim stepped from the cockpit, weight lifted slightly by adrenaline and relief, and looked back at the massive machine. She had been more than a plane today. She had been a force, a guardian, a single bomber army that defied expectation and etched her legend into history. As the sun dipped, lower over the Apennines, casting long shadows over the Cerignola Airfield, the crew gathered for a brief, solemn moment. They had survived the impossible, their Liberator had endured, and their mission had succeeded beyond any calculation. Reports would later detail the staggering effectiveness of one bomber against a coordinated enemy squadron and the courage of 5 men who turned the tide of the day. The legend of the Flying Boxcar would live on, a testament to firepower, precision, and the unyielding determination of men united with machines. At 21,000 feet, the battle intensified, turning the sky above the Adriatic into a maelstrom of steel, fire, and smoke. German fighters now attacked in coordinated waves, circling like predators, diving with lethal precision, and unleashing torrents of machine gun fire that streaked across the vast blue. The first Stuka dive bomber descended from the clouds with its sirens screaming, expecting the lumbering Liberator to buckle beneath its assault. Instead, the tail turret, manned with practiced efficiency by Corporal Louis Delgado, opened fire with deadly accuracy. Tracer rounds stitched a fiery net across the dive bomber's fuselage, igniting fuel lines and sending flames roaring through its wings. The bomber spun uncontrollably, shedding debris that tumbled into the sea far below, black smoke curling like sinister fingers above the waves. In the waist, Gunners Sergeant Henry Thompson and Corporal Frank Monroe adjusted their sights on a second wave of Messerschmitt Bf 109 seconds that had attempted to flank the Liberator. They opened fire in synchronized bursts, rounds tearing through engines, rupturing fuel tanks, and shredding the sleek aluminum frames. The fighters screamed across the sky, desperate, evasive maneuvers futile against the relentless hail from 16 50 caliber Browning machine guns. One by one, the enemy planes faltered, spiraling down toward the water, leaving smoke trails like ribbons of failure. Below, the convoy of Axis ships scattered in panic, unaware that their attackers were not the Messerschmitts, but a single bomber whose firepower exceeded their wildest expectations. Inside the cockpit, Captain Jim Fletcher, 41, felt the aircraft respond to every command with the grace of a dancer, despite the carnage enveloping her. His knuckles whitened on the controls, guiding the massive machine with precision. Beside him, Lieutenant Harold Hal Green adjusted headings, calculating evasive maneuvers, wind speeds, and the relative positions of enemy fighters. Hal's eyes darted between instruments and the chaotic sky, keeping the aircraft aligned to maximize firing arcs for every gunner aboard. On his other side, Ensign Thomas Whitaker, the bombardier, prepped for a later strike against a lightly escorted convoy ship that appeared in the distance, calculating angles, altitude, and timing with meticulous care. At the flight engineer's station, Sergeant Frank Russo's hands flew over switches and gauges, monitoring temperatures, pressures, and the strain on engines. 14-cylinder Pratt & Whitney R1830 radial engines roared, their supercharged pistons working tirelessly as the massive B-24 twisted through the sky. Small punctures and dented panels from strafing runs had begun to appear, yet each system remained functional, testament to both design and maintenance. "Engines holding steady," Frank reported over the intercom, voice tense but calm. "No signs of critical failure. We can keep this up for at least 20 more minutes." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The Liberator's 16 guns sang in harmony, a symphony of lead and death that turned the Luftwaffe's assault into an exercise in futility. From nose to tail, side ports to dorsal turrets, each machine gun unleashed a hailstorm of metal that shredded wings, tore into fuselages, and forced pilots into desperate evasive maneuvers. Tracers arced gracefully through the sky, converging on target after target, leaving trails of fire and smoke in their wake. A Stuka attempting to loop around the port side was met with a synchronized barrage from both waist gunners and the ball turret, tearing through its wings and igniting a small fire that spread across its fuselage. The bomber plunged toward the sea, twisted and unrecognizable. From the cockpit, Fletcher could see the German pilot's frustration and disbelief radiating through the radio static. Their confident commands now carried panic, confusion, and desperation. One Bf-109, whose pilot had expected a quick victory, now screamed over the radio, desperately calling for backup that could not arrive fast enough. Their formation was fracturing, each wave of attackers now isolated, forced to face a single bomber that wielded the combined firepower of an entire squadron. The Luftwaffe had underestimated the flying Boxcar, and they were paying the price in blood, smoke, and the icy waters below. Delgado in the tail turret continued to track multiple targets, switching between fighters with practiced ease. The top turret, manned by Sergeant Robert Jensen, ripped into another incoming Stuka, the aircraft shuddering under the concentrated bursts. Below them, the ball turret fired continuously, sending waves of tracer rounds in rapid succession, creating overlapping fields of fire that turned the sky into a lethal maze. Even the side ports contributed, catching the flanking Bf-109 seconds in crossfire that shredded their wings and crippled their engines. The Germans, expecting a slow, lumbering target, were instead faced with an agile fortress in the air, each turret a sentry, ensuring no fighter approached unchallenged. The Liberator weaved through the clouds, dipping, rolling, and climbing with calculated precision. Fletcher's eyes were sharp, reading every shadow, anticipating every dive, predicting every maneuver. "Port side, 3 o'clock!" Delgado shouted. Fletcher banked hard, presenting the next section of the fuselage to the gunners. Bursts of tracer rounds erupted, catching the Messerschmitt mid-roll. Smoke curled from its engine, and flames erupted along its wings, sending the aircraft spinning helplessly downward. Whitaker, spotting a target below on the water, released a bomb from a shallow altitude, the detonation erupting in a fireball that engulfed a small transport ship. The impact sent debris into the air, a deadly reminder that the Liberator's assault was not limited to the skies. The battle raged on, each minute stretching into eternity. The sky above the Adriatic was filled with spiraling aircraft, tracer streaks, and the occasional flash of an exploding bomb or engine. Smoke from the downed fighters mingled with the sunlit clouds, painting a chaotic tableau of war. Below, sailors in the Yo Axis convoy struggled to maintain control of their vessels, some attempting to maneuver around flaming wreckage, others abandoning ship in desperation. The combined psychological and physical impact of a single B-24 against a squadron was becoming evident. Every pilot on the German side realized, too late, that they had misjudged the threat, and the consequences were lethal. Fletcher's breathing was measured, every command deliberate. He spoke to his crew with calm urgency. "Keep firing, cover all angles, watch for stragglers. They can't touch us if we remain unpredictable." Each gunner responded, their discipline flawless, despite fatigue and stress. The harmony of firepower was nearly perfect, a lethal machine operating as one entity, driven by human courage and skill. Even minor scratches and dents on the fuselage did not diminish their effectiveness, nor did the occasional bullet hole that whistled past an engine cowling. The Germans attempted to regroup, forming small clusters to concentrate fire on the tail and waist sections. Fletcher anticipated these maneuvers, banking sharply to bring different turrets into firing arcs. Delgado and Jensen switched targets seamlessly, the twin barrels of their .50 caliber Browning machine guns unleashing devastating bursts. Thompson and Monroe adjusted their fire to intercept dive bombers that sought to exploit gaps in coverage. The Liberator became a living fortress, her guns, the walls, engines, the heart, and crew, the sinew, holding it all together. As the engagement reached its peak, the sky became a violent tapestry of smoke, tracer, and fire. Another Stuka plummeted, torn apart by converging fire from all turrets. A Bf-109 attempted a desperate head-on attack, but Fletcher rolled the aircraft, presenting the nose turret to the oncoming fighter. Whitaker squeezed the trigger, and the fighter's engine erupted in flames. It spiraled down, leaving only smoke and debris as evidence. Every gun aboard the Liberator was firing in synchronized rhythm, each burst a note in a deadly symphony that the Germans could neither anticipate nor withstand. Even as fatigue weighed upon the crew, the Liberator responded with unwavering resolve. Her engines roared against the resistance of wind and gravity, maintaining altitude despite minor punctures and structural damage. Russo's monitoring ensured that each cylinder performed optimally, preventing catastrophic failure. Every gauge, every dial, every switch was a testament to the crew's discipline and the aircraft's engineering. The combination of skill, coordination, and firepower allowed them to turn what could have been a slaughter into a decisive counterattack, an aerial demonstration of the Liberator's unmatched capabilities. Minutes later, the German formation began to collapse entirely. Panic replaced precision, chaos replaced confidence. Pilots shouted over the radio, calling for retreat, some attempting evasive maneuvers that only further exposed them to overlapping fields of fire. One by one, they fell into the sea, leaving smoke trails that darkened the horizon. The Liberator had turned a mission expected to be routine into a cataclysmic demonstration of firepower. Reports later noted that the Germans could scarcely believe a single bomber could inflict such damage, destroy multiple fighters, and disrupt convoy operations with calculated precision. Fletcher allowed a brief glance downward, seeing the wreckage of enemy aircraft floating or sinking into the Adriatic. The convoy, scattered and damaged, limped toward safer waters, delayed for hours, if not days. The psychological impact of witnessing a single bomber dominate the skies had shattered morale among the surviving Luftwaffe pilots. For Jim and his crew, there was no time for triumph, only focus. They still had miles to traverse, and more enemy patrols could appear at any moment. As the sun began its descent over the Apennines, the Liberator maintained altitude, a survivor of chaos. Every turret had been fired, every gunner tested, yet the aircraft endured, her engines singing a metallic hymn to resilience. Fletcher's knuckles relaxed slightly on the controls, a rare exhale escaping him. Delgado, Thompson, Monroe, Jensen, Whitaker, Hal, and Rousseau shared brief glances, exhaustion written across their faces, but pride unmistakable. They had survived, they had triumphed, and their machine had proven its legendary capacity. By the time Cerignola Airfield appeared on the horizon, the Liberator's silhouette was a testament to engineering, courage, and teamwork. She had survived countless attacks, outgunned an entire squadron, and executed a mission that would later be chronicled as extraordinary in military history. The flying boxcar lumbered onto the runway, engines roaring in a triumphant symphony that echoed across the tarmac. Ground crews rushed forward, astonished by the crew's report. 14 enemy aircraft destroyed, 2 crippled, and several supply ships sunk or damaged. Captain Fletcher stepped from the cockpit, a mixture of relief and pride etched into his 41-year-old features. The crew followed, shoulders stiff, hands still trembling from the adrenaline. The sky above Cerignola remained clear now, only wisps of smoke lingering, a quiet testament to the storm that had raged at 21,000 feet. The legend of the B-24 Liberator, outfitted with 16 .50 caliber machine guns, had been cemented. 1 bomber, 5 men, and a mission that proved that sheer firepower, skill, and courage could turn the tide of battle in ways that no enemy pilot could have predicted in the skies above Italy. By noon, the sky over the southern Adriatic had become a graveyard of twisted metal and smoke. The German squadron, once confident and predatory, had suffered devastating losses. Outnumbered, but not outgunned, the B-24 Liberator pressed forward, its engines roaring, wings steady despite the punishing aerial ballet of bullets and tracer rounds it had endured. Captain James "Jim" Fletcher, 41, sat in the cockpit with a calm determination, his eyes scanning the horizon for remaining enemy threats. Beside him, Lieutenant Harold Halgreen adjusted course, calculating intercepts and wind drift to maintain an optimal bombing trajectory over the convoy below. Each of the crew members was aware of the stakes. They had survived waves of attacks that would have destroyed lesser aircraft, and now they had a chance to complete the mission for which they had flown into a storm of fire and death. Convoys still in range. Jim's voice cut through the intercom, steady, almost eerily calm despite the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "Drop the bombs, Hal." The words, simple and precise, carried the weight of countless hours of preparation, training, and sheer grit. Ensign Thomas Whitaker, the bombardier, leaned over the bomb site, adjusting the alignment, sweat trickling down his temples. His hands moved quickly, almost mechanically, as he accounted for altitude, airspeed, wind, and the movement of the enemy vessels below. The Mediterranean glittered beneath him, a deceptive calm that belied the destruction they were about to unleash. Each second seemed to stretch, every breath of the crew synchronized with the ticking of invisible clocks counting down to impact. The moment of release came. Whitaker pressed the bomb release lever, and the payload began its descent toward the scattered convoy. The Mediterranean shuddered beneath massive explosions, water erupting in columns of fire and foam as bombs struck enemy vessels. The force of the detonations rocked smaller boats, capsizing them entirely, sending sailors scrambling into the sea in desperate attempts to escape the inferno. Smoke curled, and waves crashed violently against surviving ships, creating a chaos that the Axis forces could not control. The Liberator's guns, still bristling with unspent ammunition, had cleared the skies of fighters, ensuring that the bombs would strike unopposed. Below, the enemy's supply lines lay in tatters, reinforcements delayed, and the once proud flotilla reduced to burning wreckage. Inside the aircraft, the crew felt a rare and tangible surge of triumph. Sergeant Frank Rousseau monitored the engines, ensuring that the strain of evasive maneuvers, heavy altitude, and continuous turret fire had not damaged the aircraft beyond its limits. Every gauge told a story of resilience. Every engine cylinder roared in defiance of the chaos outside. Corporal Luis Delgado in the tail turret swept the skies one last time, scanning for stragglers, the movement of his fingers over triggers betraying fatigue but also pride. Sergeant Robert Jensen, manning the top turret, kept an eye on distant smoke trails, counting aircraft that had not survived the encounter. Even the waist gunners, Thompson and Monroe, allowed themselves a brief glance of satisfaction. They had been part of an aerial symphony, each burst of 50 caliber bullets, a note in a composition of death and precision, a declaration that one bomber could, indeed, stand against an entire squadron. Jim Fletcher's mind was a mixture of calculation and reflection. Every decision made over the past hour had been critical. Every evasive maneuver, every turret alignment, every dive and roll had meant the difference between life and death. Now, as the last German aircraft peeled away, retreating toward the Italian mainland, disbelief was apparent in the sky itself. The Luftwaffe pilots had expected an easy kill, a simple passage of their Stukas and Bf 109 seconds through a corridor of defenseless bombers. Instead, they faced the wrath of 16 50 caliber guns, coordinated by men who understood the lethal potential of the B-24 and survived to tell the story. The Liberator had become a force multiplier, a single machine outgunning what many believed was an entire squadron, and in doing so, had rewritten the tactical assumptions of air combat for that day. The Adriatic, which had glimmered with deceptive serenity moments before, was now littered with wreckage. Smoke plumes rose from downed ships and aircraft alike, curling into the air in mournful spirals. The water reflected flashes of burning metal, twisted fragments of planes, and the occasional drifting lifeboat. The cost of underestimating a single aircraft capable of delivering both firepower and bombs with unprecedented efficiency was now starkly evident. For the men aboard the Liberator, there was no room for complacency. Though the skies were clearing, the aftermath required vigilance. They had survived, yes, but they had also entered history, a history written in smoke, lead, and courage. Fletcher allowed himself a brief moment to appreciate the aircraft beneath him. The B-24, despite receiving minor punctures to the fuselage and dents from near-miss rounds, had endured every assault. Its Davis wings, designed for both lift and range, had carried the immense weight of ammunition, crew, and ordnance with remarkable stability. Each engine had performed flawlessly, the radial pistons singing under Russo's watchful eyes. Even the ball turret, vulnerable and exposed, had fulfilled its role without failure. The Liberator was more than steel and aluminum. It was an extension of the crew's will, a testament to human ingenuity married with engineering excellence. Eyes forward, Fletcher commanded as the airfield at Cerignola came into view, a ribbon of tarmac glinting under the early afternoon sun. The approach required careful management. The aircraft was heavily loaded, and fatigue among the crew meant that every maneuver needed focus. Flaps adjusted, landing gear extended, and the massive machine descended steadily, engines whining under controlled strain. The scent of smoke from previous battles lingered in the cabin, mingling with the smell of gun oil and adrenaline that had yet to dissipate. Ground crews watched in awe as the battered Liberator lumbered toward the runway, its reputation preceding it even before wheels touched the tarmac. Touchdown was precise, smooth despite the damage, and as the tires kissed the runway, a collective sigh of relief filled the cabin. Crew members exchanged glances, faces streaked with sweat and grime, smiles tentative but victorious. Fletcher cut the engines, allowing the massive propellers to wind down slowly, the roar diminishing into a low purr. Outside, ground personnel ran forward, anticipating the story that the returning bomber would tell. 4 Stukas destroyed, 3 Bf 109 seconds downed, and multiple supply vessels obliterated in a single strike, an achievement rarely seen in aerial combat. The weight of accomplishment settled heavily on each man. Delgado climbed from the tail turret, stretching stiff limbs, while Jensen lowered himself from the top turret. Thompson and Monroe exchanged nods, hands shaking slightly, not from fear but from the residual rush of firing thousands of rounds and seeing the impact firsthand. Whitaker, still gripping the bombsight lever, allowed a rare smile to form, the satisfaction of having delivered ordnance with precision and lethality. Hal, at the navigator's station, slumped in his seat briefly, calculating fuel and distance, realizing that the journey back had been almost as dangerous as the attack itself. Fletcher stepped from the cockpit, adjusting his flight cap, the sun glinting off his 41-year-old features, lined with both age and experience. He surveyed the aftermath from the tarmac, the glint of burned-out aircraft in the Adriatic, smoke spiraling from sunken transports, and the astonished faces of ground crew members who had witnessed the return of what many considered an unremarkable bomber. Yet this B-24, the flying Boxcar, had proven itself extraordinary, its combination of armament, endurance, and crew coordination rewriting assumptions about what a single aircraft could achieve in combat. Each man understood that they had been part of history that day. The Liberator had not only survived against the odds, but had reshaped the battlefield. Reports would later confirm that the German squadron had underestimated the B-24's firepower, and that single-handedly, one aircraft and her crew had disrupted supply lines, destroyed enemy fighters, and inflicted psychological damage that would ripple across the Axis command. The realization that a single bomber could outgun an entire squadron challenged conventional wisdom and underscored the synergy between machine and man. Fletcher addressed the crew, voice steady despite fatigue. Today, we did what few thought possible. 1 plane, 16 guns, and the determination to see it through. Remember this moment, not for glory, but for the lives we've saved, the mission we've completed, and the truth we've shown the world. The Liberator is more than a bomber, it's a force no one can ignore. The men nodded, silent acknowledgement passing among them. Words seemed inadequate to capture the intensity of what they had experienced, the convergence of fear, courage, and precision that had defined the last several hours. As the airfield crews began refueling and performing damage assessments, Fletcher allowed himself to reflect. The B-24's performance had exceeded even the most optimistic predictions. Its speed, range, and maneuverability had been critical in outmaneuvering and outgunning enemy fighters. Its Davis wings, combined with robust radial engines and carefully maintained systems, had provided the stability and resilience necessary for both evasive action and concentrated firepower. In the hands of a skilled crew, the aircraft had become a living fortress, a mobile gun platform capable of redefining aerial engagements. The Liberator's shadow stretched across the tarmac as the sun climbed higher, casting a long silhouette that seemed to echo the enormity of the mission accomplished. Crew members began the meticulous process of unloading spent ammunition, checking weapons, and inspecting engines for damage. Each step was methodical, a contrast to the chaos of the morning's battle, yet no less critical. A misaligned turret, a malfunctioning engine, or a neglected control surface could spell disaster on the next sortie. The men moved with the precision and care of artisans, aware that the survival of many depended upon the machine's continued reliability. As the last reports were filed, and the B-24 settled into a quiet readiness for its next mission, Fletcher allowed a brief moment of personal reflection. He thought of the crews who would come after them, who might fly this same aircraft into similar infernos of enemy fire. He considered the men of the Luftwaffe, their surprise and disbelief, and the countless sailors whose supplies had been destroyed. History would record the events of that day, but the personal victories, the courage under fire, and the bond between man and machine were known only to those who had lived through the firestorm. The Adriatic glimmered in the afternoon sun, a deceptive calm that belied the chaos that had unfolded above its waves. Fletcher, Whitaker, Hal, Delgado, Russo, Thompson, Monroe, and Jensen shared a silent acknowledgement. They had survived a battle that defied belief, demonstrated the true power of the B-24 Liberator, and achieved a mission that would echo in the annals of military aviation. The flying Boxcar had turned the tide, not by numbers, not by conventional might, but by sheer firepower, precision, and the indomitable courage of a crew unwilling to be defeated. As the airfield settled into its normal rhythm, Fletcher stood near the nose of the aircraft, tracing a finger along the gleaming fuselage, now scarred by combat but unbowed. "We've shown them," he whispered, voice barely audible over the hum of residual engine activity, "what a single bomber can do when flown by men who refuse to fail." Around him, the crew moved quietly, tending to instruments, equipment, and personal needs, each aware that the day's events had forged a bond stronger than steel, more enduring than memory, and more lethal than the combined might of an entire enemy squadron. The legacy of that day would endure, etched into reports, whispered in airfields, and remembered in the quiet moments before the next mission. A single B-24 Liberator, outfitted with 16 .50 caliber machine guns, had turned the assumptions of aerial warfare on their head. One aircraft, manned by 7 men, had become a force multiplier, a testament to courage, ingenuity, and the enduring spirit of those who dared to challenge overwhelming odds. The sky had been theirs, if only for a moment, and in that moment, history had been rewritten. The Liberator touched down at Cerignola as the sun dipped low behind the Apennines, casting long shadows over the tarmac. Its engines groaned in protest, heavy with fatigue yet defiant, as ground crews ran forward, astonished by the reports filtering in from the sky. 14 enemy aircraft had been destroyed, 2 more crippled, and an entire convoy's supplies annihilated. Across Allied intelligence channels, disbelief mixed with awe. The Germans could scarcely fathom that a single B-24, a lone heavy bomber, had inflicted the devastation typically expected from an entire Luftwaffe squadron. Captain James "Jim" Fletcher climbed out of the cockpit, his 41-year-old frame hunched with exhaustion, yet radiating relief. His crew followed, each step deliberate, boots dragging through the scorched and battered runway. Sergeant Frank Russo muttered, wiping soot from his uniform, "She's a beauty, and she'll haunt them for the rest of the war." Word spread quickly through Allied command. The Liberator was more than an aircraft, it was a weapon of psychological and physical might, a declaration that the skies belonged not only to those with numbers, but to those with firepower and courage. Yet the crew knew that triumph carried a weight. The waters of the Adriatic below bore the remnants of enemy pilots and shattered planes, a stark reminder of the cost of survival. Amid grief, adrenaline, and fatigue, pride settled quietly among them. They had achieved the impossible. One bomber had turned the tide of an engagement, rewriting expectations and proving that human resolve, paired with the engineering marvel of the B-24, could redefine warfare in the skies. Decades later, in 1967, Captain James "Jim" Fletcher returned to Cerignola. The airfield had changed beyond recognition. Modern commercial jets gliding across runways where once the roar of bombers had dominated the skies. Yet in Fletcher's mind, the old B-24 Liberator remained vivid, a flying boxcar armed with 16 .50 caliber machine guns, a single aircraft capable of outgunning an entire Luftwaffe squadron. He walked slowly along the tarmac, the sun low in the late afternoon sky, his eyes tracing the contours of hangars and taxiways now silent, polished, and orderly. At the edge of the field stood a small bronze plaque honouring the crew of that Liberator, silent witnesses to the chaos and fire they had once commanded. Children ran past. Tourists snapped photographs, unaware of the battles that had raged above the Adriatic, unaware that a lone bomber had altered the course of an engagement that day in August 1943. Fletcher knelt, fingers brushing the engraved names of his fallen comrades, a quiet smile forming despite the years and loss. "That one plane," he murmured to himself, voice almost lost to the breeze, "did what an army could not." The sound of wind seemed to carry faint echoes of .50 caliber gunfire, a spectral reminder that courage, ingenuity, and the raw firepower of human determination could defy all expectation. Above the Mediterranean, in memory if not in reality, the Liberator still soared, wings catching the light as it had all those years ago, a ghostly sentinel of a sky once ruled by thunder and resolve. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.